You think you know who your closest companion is, but by the end of this video, you'll realize it's someone you've ignored your entire life. Imagine walking into a living room crowded with friendly voices, glasses touching, music humming through soft lights, and feeling an almost surgical emptiness settle behind your ribs. You smile because that is how people survive these gatherings, yet every cell in your body whispers that no one in the room sees the storm sitting behind your eyes. The conversation passes over you like weather on a windshield. You nod, you laugh, you make the effort that civility requires. Inside, a silent ache keeps repeating the same sentence. I am here, but I am not really here. On the drive home, the streetlights smear across the windshield, neon halos stretching in the rain, and a thought you try to ignore grows louder. Everyone tells you to reach out, to stay positive, to find community. You followed the advice. You scheduled therapy sessions, filled journals with gratitude lists, attended workshops that promised breakthroughs, recited affirmations in the mirror until your voice cracked. The void still greets you each dawn. It stands next to your bed like a patient shadow that refuses to be exiled. This is the moment no influencer wants to film and no polished article wants to print, because here the smile fades. Here the light ring switches off. Here a human being sits alone at 2 a.m, scrolling through feeds filled with curated happiness, sensing the cruel gap between curated lives and lived lives. You keep scrolling, trying to outrun a feeling that has outpaced you for decades. Somewhere you learned that validation lives outside. Gold stars in childhood classrooms, approval in teenage social circles, promotions in adult offices, hearts and thumbs on bright blue screens. The pattern stays constant. Do more, smile wider, silence discomfort, earn love. Yet each external medal leaves a bruise instead of a balm. The more you chase, the more you bleed. The more you achieve, the more dissonance you sense between the story you show and the truth you carry. Friends advise you to think positive. Relatives remind you to count blessings. Therapists, the well-meaning ones at least, teach breathing exercises and cognitive reframes. All these methods have value in certain seasons. Still, when the apartment grows quiet and no one is texting back, the old cold returns. It sits in your gut like wet concrete, telling you that your life is an empty theater after the actors left. Pause here and breathe with me. It is important to name the ache without anesthetizing it. You are not mistaken. You are not oversensitive. The loneliness is real. The exhaustion is valid. Pretending otherwise would be cruelty. There is one companion who has been with you from the first heartbeat. This companion watched your toddler joy, absorbed your childhood shame, felt every teenage sting, and stood guard while your adult heart broke under obligations you never consciously chose. You ignore this companion every day, and until you learn to turn toward them, no friendship, no romance, no social circle, no salary, no certificate will ever feel like enough. You tried therapy, you tried self-help, you tried relationships, you even tried convincing yourself that wanting more is selfish. The same hollow returns because you left the most essential person alone. That person lives under your skin, behind your ribs, beneath every memory you locked away. Remember the evening when you finally confessed a secret and the listener shrugged it off, saying it was not a big deal. The part of you that needed to be heard shrank deeper. Remember the day you got the promotion and felt nothing but fatigue. The part of you that measures worth by authenticity, not applause, whispered that success without self-connection is another costume. Remember the breakup that forced you to admit you never felt fully met. The part of you that craves real intimacy realized you cannot receive what you have not yet offered to yourself. The world keeps selling solutions that orbit around performance. Build the perfect morning routine, hack productivity, manifest happiness. Yet nobody tells you what to do when the inner child still hides under the bed, clutching an old fear that love means judgment, that vulnerability invites abandonment. Gold stars cannot reach under that bed. Promotions cannot coax that child into daylight. Compliments cannot quiet the inner critic trained to expect the worst. Lean into this silence with me. Notice the breath which has been rising and falling since before you learned your own name. Hear the faint heartbeat that began its rhythm long before you spoke a single word. Beneath every label you chase, there is an unnamed presence that has never left you. That presence is the neglected companion. You may want to look away because meeting them feels like staring into a mirror without lighting, filters, or flattering angles. They carry every disappointment you repressed. They guard the grief that teachers dismissed, the anger caregivers punished, the joy employers considered childish. Paying attention to them feels risky because you learn to equate attention with criticism. Pause again. Let the discomfort surface. Let the stomach tighten. Let the throat close. This is not failure. This is a reunion. Each sensation signals that a long-silenced guest is knocking. Imagine sitting at a kitchen table with the lights dimmed. Across from you sits a younger version of yourself. Their shoulders are hunched from years of pretending. Their hands shake from holding back words. They do not trust your smile because you abandoned them every time life demanded masks. Tonight, you decide to stay. You decide to listen. You decide to bear witness to everything polite society told you to forget. In the stillness, a realization flickers like a match in a dark room. You are not empty. You are unaccompanied by yourself. The hollow feeling is not a missing piece. It is the echo of footsteps walking away from the room that houses your rawest truths. External validation never fills the echo because echoes do not need filling. They need presence. They need someone to stand in the room and speak in a voice that does not flee. There is one companion who has been with you since the beginning. You ignore them every day, and until you see them, no love will ever feel enough. Feel the weight of that statement. Let it press into the bones. Let it challenge the stories that say salvation arrives through romance or popularity or spiritual enlightenment attained on a weekend retreat. The forgotten companion is none of those. They are the part of you that felt invisible on the playground, the part that stayed silent when parents fought, the part that learned to perform loyalty while deserting self. When darkness settles in your bedroom and the city hum falls quiet, this companion sits at the foot of your bed. They do not hold grudges. They do not judge. They simply wait. Each sleepless night is a summons. Each restless morning is a reminder. The ache is less a punishment and more a flare in the sky, signaling the location of the soul you misplaced. Perhaps you bought every recommended book. Perhaps you practiced gratitude until the words felt hollow. Perhaps you memorized positive affirmations that never penetrated deeper than skin. None of it eased the core loneliness, because every method began with the assumption that you were insufficient and needed improvement. The forgotten companion does not demand improvement. They demand recognition. Recognition feels terrifying because it brings chaos. It means admitting the facade has cracks. It means welcoming tears at unpredictable times. It means grieving years spent chasing applause from people who never understood your language. Yet chaos is honest. In chaos, you rediscover vitality that straightened spines yet hollowed hearts cannot access. Breathe once more. Feel the air move. No need to correct posture, repeat mantras, or force calm. Simply notice life animating lungs without permission or performance. That quiet pulse beneath conscious control is proof that a companion lives within, tending to survival even when self-rejection reigns. Imagine what might change if you directed the devotion you give to strangers on social media toward the self who held you through every silent breakdown. Imagine meeting your own gaze in the mirror and telling the truth instead of reciting slogans. Imagine building a home inside your body where anger, sorrow, fear, and hope can sit at the same table without shame. You have reached this moment because surface answers failed. There is no shame in that failure. It proves you are ready for something deeper. You were never lazy. You were never broken. You simply followed maps drawn by people who fear their own shadows, and those maps led you away from your own heart. Stay here. Feel the pulse. Feel the breath. Let the shoulders drop. Let the jaw unclench. The discomfort that rises is an invitation rather than an obstacle. The companion is stepping forward. They do not speak in words. They speak through sensations, memories, images that flicker behind closed eyes. Listen without interrupting. Witness without judging. The night may feel longer than usual. The silence may ring louder. Yet beneath it all, something steady emerges, like a lighthouse beam cutting through fog. It is the presence that has never left you, the presence that never demanded perfection, the presence that loves you with a fierceness you have never given yourself. By the end of this video, you will understand why this forgotten companion is your only real home. You spent entire decades mastering the art of performance. Every morning you adjusted your face before you left the bathroom mirror, smoothing it into the expression that reassures colleagues, partners, and even strangers on the sidewalk that you have life sorted out. The calendar filled itself with dinners, deadlines, family visits, and fitness plans. You obeyed the algorithm that rewards relentless motion because rest looks suspicious in a culture that worships productivity. Still, beneath each accomplishment pulsed a restless hum, a discreet alarm that insisted something essential remained untouched. The world applauds visible trophies, so you chase them with disciplined devotion. A fresh relationship felt like a sunrise, promising warmth that would melt every frozen place inside. The glow lasted until the first argument exposed your private terror of being fully known. You earned degrees because society bows to credentials, only to feel a hollow echo in the auditorium of your chest on graduation day. You pursued promotions, expecting a new title to translate into dignity. Instead, the pay raise amplified an inner voice, whispering that you tricked the system and would soon be exposed. People advised you to think positive, as if optimism were a coat you could purchase off the rack and wear over old wounds. You followed gratitude challenges and wrote lists each evening. You smiled on command, repeating lines about abundance until they tasted metallic in your mouth. The practice helped on the surface, like rearranging furniture in a burning house. Deep below, the original blaze continued to swallow oxygen. You took workshop after workshop, paying good money to learn how perception shapes reality. The teachers delivered slogans about manifesting success, yet the final drive home felt strangely identical to the drive there. A brief high deteriorated into familiar emptiness. Some therapies offered comfort, but not confrontation. Weekly sessions provided a space to vent frustrations, but the moment the clock struck 50 minutes, the session closed, and the loneliest companion followed you out of the office untouched. Coping skills taught you how to manage symptoms, yet symptoms exist to signal the deeper source of pain. Treating signals while ignoring origins became another polished illusion. Labels helped organize patterns, yet a diagnosis without integration can reduce a living soul to a clinical shorthand. You learned new language to describe old stories, but language alone cannot transform a narrative still written in fear. Here is the confession hidden behind self-help books and inspirational podcasts. Chasing love, achievements, or external validation fails because each attempt is a clever detour around the one corridor you dread walking through. Success cannot substitute for self-contact. Applause cannot silence a heart that still believes its authenticity is unlovable. Romantic euphoria cannot bury the suspicion that intimacy reveals instead of rescues. Every external pursuit tries to pour water into a bucket riddled with invisible holes. No matter how much you pour, the bucket insists on emptiness because the perforations were never addressed. Most psychologists won't tell you this. You can't love others fully while betraying the one person who has been with you in every heartbreak, every success, every night you cried alone. The neglected inner companion senses each betrayal when you override intuition to impress acquaintances, when you sacrifice rest to satisfy unrealistic expectations, when you swallow anger to keep peace that tastes like poison. The emotional system registers these moments as abandonment, layering fresh grief over childhood echoes of the same sensation. You have been running from yourself while looking for someone else to save you. The paradox stings because it reveals the futility of endless motion. You sprint toward new goals like a traveler crossing desert dunes, convinced an oasis waits over the next rise. Yet the horizon recedes with each stride. The thirst persists. Movement masquerades as progress, but without inward alignment, the traveler loops in circles, leaving deeper footprints in the same sand. Think about the books that promise confidence in 30 days, the seminars that guarantee purpose by the end of a weekend, the influencers who insist you can rewrite beliefs by chanting affirmations before dawn. Each method offers speed, efficiency, and escape from discomfort. They transform inner work into a to-do list, reducing complexity to a series of steps. The human soul resists assembly line treatment. It blooms in the soil of time, presence, and radical honesty. Shortcuts bypass essential terrain where shame hides buried treasure, where grief guards untapped vitality, where anger protects violated boundaries. Skip that terrain, and the treasure stays buried. Outsource the journey, and the map may look accurate, yet contain no path to embodied change. Feel the frustration building. Let it rise like a tide against the seawall of outdated beliefs. You invested energy, money, and hope in methods that promised relief. They offered glimpses of peace, but peace evaporated when life presented the next challenge. You blamed yourself because marketing frames failure as a lack of commitment rather than a flaw in the method. You worked harder, repeated mantras louder, forced smiles wider. Vicious cycles gain power when shame fuels perseverance in the wrong direction. Perfectionism operates as a flawless disguise for self-rejection. Striving to be good enough masks the fear that raw identity is fundamentally flawed. Hustle culture exploits that fear by conflating worth with output. The world salutes those who never stop producing, ignoring the toll on nervous systems calibrated to perpetual threat. Exhaustion wears designer clothing and passes for ambition. Achievements become socially acceptable self-harm when acquired at the expense of inner connection. Even spirituality can become an elegant escape. Seekers chase enlightenment, like entrepreneurs chase startup valuations, collecting transcendental experiences without integrating the shadow. Vision boards display bright futures, while closets remain cluttered with unresolved sorrow. Meditation apps soothe the mind, but can also numb the body's call for attention. Transcendence without embodiment floats above reality, leaving core wounds untouched. Feel the ground beneath your feet now. Notice gravity, that loyal reminder of physical existence. Your body carries every memory your mind prefers to forget. Achievements cannot bribe muscles to release tension created by years of ignored emotions. You might schedule massages, yet knots return because they belong to stories still waiting to be told. External rewards treat symptoms like painkillers, treat headaches caused by dehydration. Water, not pills, resolves the root. Listen closely to the cultural conversation about self-care. Advertisements rename consumption as healing. Bubble baths and scented candles have nothing inherently wrong with them, yet they become distractions when used to avoid intimacy with internal reality. Real self-care sometimes means sitting in a silent room with nothing to scroll, no playlist to drown sensations, no productivity to justify existence, simply meeting the self left alone in all those crowded rooms. That encounter can feel terrifying, which is why industries profit by offering comfortable detours. Here comes the next illusion: emotional bypass through intellectual understanding. You read studies about trauma, analyze attachment styles, memorize neuroscience explaining survival responses. Knowledge feels empowering. However, knowledge stored only in the cortex never soothes the limbic system where fear lives. Insight without felt experience can even thicken defenses, because the mind believes comprehension equals completion. Therapy sessions risk becoming academic if they chase explanations while avoiding embodied engagement with sorrow, rage, or terror. Healing requires descending from analysis into sensation, allowing the body to speak in tremors, tears, or heat. Notice the pattern. The modern world reveres speed, intellect, performance, polish. Your forgotten companion embodies slowness, feeling, authenticity, mess. Turning toward them contradicts societal conditioning. That contradiction explains the resistance that erupts each time you attempt to pause. Restlessness floods the nervous system, tempting you back into distraction. The moment you switch on a screen or plan the next project, relief arrives because the internal meeting was postponed. Postponement keeps you functional in public while depleted in private. The frustration you feel right now is sacred evidence of awakening. Rage toward broken promises signals that you no longer accept mediocrity disguised as help. Disappointment in quick fixes confirms your appetite for truth. Exhaustion with positivity culture proves your intuition senses deeper currents beneath surface cheerfulness. Let the frustration burn, because fire transforms what can no longer serve into ash, making soil fertile for honest growth. Most narratives about achievement ignore the cost of disconnection. They celebrate the author who writes bestsellers but quietly battles insomnia and numbness. They glorify the executive who scales companies yet drinks alone to silence panic. They romanticize the athlete who wins medals while crushing vulnerability under stoic discipline. Success stories rarely reveal the inner exile that fuels external triumphs. You witness the outcome, never the internal collateral damage. The hole inside cannot be filled with applause because it was carved by abandonment, not by failure. Achievements feel hollow when earned by sacrificing self-relationship. Relationships feel unsteady when built on performance rather than presence. Even love, the most sought after of all human experiences, becomes fragile when offered to a person who has not met themselves in the dark. Loving another while neglecting self is like pouring water from an empty vessel. Sooner or later, both parties thirst. You might wonder why positive thinking remains so popular if it rarely addresses underlying wounds. The reason is simple. Positivity feels good in the short term and requires little courage. It brushes discomfort aside with quick dopamine hits. Facing inner darkness, on the other hand, threatens identity structures built on avoidance. Societies that prioritize productivity cannot afford collective descent into feeling, so they elevate optimism as the socially sanctioned anesthesia. Optimism used discerningly serves life. Optimism used compulsively silences life. Pause again. Sense the breath you often forget to notice. The lungs expand and contract without needing affirmation, proof that life persists, even in disconnection. Underneath the layers of conditioning, the body remembers authenticity. Each sigh, each yawn, each spontaneous tear is the forgotten companion tapping on the walls of consciousness. Ignoring those messages turns the body into a battleground, because unacknowledged truth always finds expression, whether through migraines, digestive issues, or chronic exhaustion. Symptoms speak the language of the shadow. Corporations learned how to monetize insecurity. They sell clothing, cosmetics, courses, and gadgets, promising confidence by association. The logic says, upgrade the exterior and the interior will follow. You upgraded wardrobes and gadgets, embraced trending diets, curated digital profiles, yet self-criticism persisted because the critic resides inside, immune to external enhancements. Trying to heal internalized shame with material goods mirrors, trying to read in darkness by acquiring more books instead of turning on a light. Some therapies do reach deeper, yet even skilled guides cannot substitute your willingness to confront what you fear. Therapy becomes another avoidance strategy when you attend sessions, but refuse to integrate outside the office. Insight gained in the room must be practiced in real life, otherwise it collects dust like unused tools. The inner companion longs not for intellectual comprehension, but for communion. Communion happens in the everyday moments when you notice a surge of sadness and choose to validate it rather than distract, when you catch yourself self-sabotaging and respond with curiosity instead of condemnation. Remember this paradox one more time. You've been running from yourself while looking for someone else to save you. Every time you chase rescue outside, you reinforce the belief that internal presence is not enough. That belief intensifies desperation, making external pursuits more frantic. The loop continues until an interruption occurs. Interruption often appears as crisis, burnout, breakup, illness, or existential dread. Crisis strips illusions, leaving the raw self exposed. That moment feels like collapse, yet collapse initiates humility, and humility opens the door to genuine contact. Feel the edge of that door now. Behind it waits the darker reason you avoid this person. The reason transcends societal conditioning and reaches into primal instincts. There is something in the depths you suspect might overwhelm. A force you fear might devour the life you built. You contain rage that feels volcanic, grief that feels oceanic, desire that feels forbidden. Meeting those forces threatens stability as you know it. Avoidance preserves the familiar, even if the familiar suffocates. There's something even darker about why we avoid this person, and we'll get to that in a moment. Pause here and notice the flutter in your chest, the mix of relief and dread that rises when an old illusion finally cracks. It's the body's way of saying, yes, this hurts, but it also feels like oxygen. Let that sensation linger for a breath or two, because acknowledging it is the first honest act you've offered yourself in far too long. If these words feel uncomfortably true, subscribe to this channel, not for motivation, but for the truth that most people can't handle, because someone out there is ready to stop running from themselves, and maybe it's you. When you click that button, you're not joining another feel-good echo chamber. You're choosing a space where raw honesty is the baseline and depth is the only currency. Each subscription pushes this conversation into more timelines where silent wanderers are waiting for a signal that it's safe to come home to themselves. You stand at the mouth of a tunnel that feels both ancient and freshly carved. Cold air drifts out, smelling faintly of earth and electricity, and a pressure builds behind your sternum that tells you turning around would be easier. Easier has been the guiding star for most of your life. Easier looked like good grades to quiet a critical parent. Easier felt like early promotions to silence an inner judge. Easier sounded like laughter at jokes you never found funny, just to keep friendships from fracturing. Easier has always demanded that one particular companion stay gagged in the dark so the show could go on. That gagged presence is your own shadow, the constellation of impulses, emotions, and memories you pushed underground the day someone hinted they were unacceptable. The impulse to scream when boundaries were crossed, the jealousy that flashed when a sibling stole the spotlight, the yearning for tenderness after heartbreak that you disguised as invulnerability. One by one you exiled these parts, believing exile would grant safety. What it granted was numbness dressed up as maturity. You were taught to reject parts of you, anger, sadness, fear, because someone once told you they make you unlovable, so you buried them, and in doing so, you buried yourself. The burial began quietly. A teacher frowned when you cried at your desk, and you swallowed tears so you could be praised for resilience. A caregiver flinched at your rage, and you rebranded rage as politeness so dinner could stay peaceful. Peer groups mocked vulnerability, so you glued on a grin that fooled everyone but the heart it covered. Childhood conditioning, refined by parental expectations and sharpened by shame, taught you that survival meant partitioning the soul into acceptable and forbidden corridors. Everything you repress doesn't disappear. It becomes the voice in your head, the tension in your body, the reason every relationship feels incomplete. The buried anger roars as headaches when you keep saying yes to tasks that drain you. The suppressed grief leaks out as sarcasm when friends share their joy. The ignored fear hardens into chronic stiffness along the spine, an armor that keeps hugs from sinking in. The unconscious never forgets what the conscious refuses to name. It simply repackages the past into symptoms, patterns, and endless déjà vu. Your shadow is not a villain. It is the storehouse of vitality, creativity, and passion you locked away when the world convinced you that neatness equaled safety. Yet neatness without depth becomes sterility, and sterility strains every bond you form. Lovers sense the cold spots, children mirror the unspoken tension, colleagues feel the emotional distance masked as professionalism. You wonder why intimacy stalls at a glass wall, why feedback stings like acid, why joy feels fleeting. The answer is simple, though never easy. The companion you avoid is the key to freedom, not because they'll make life perfect, but because they'll make it real. Pain has been a persistent tutor. Your loneliness isn't proof that you're broken. It's proof that the most important relationship in your life has been neglected. Loneliness rings loudest when self-abandonment reaches a climax. The ache says, "Come home." Each restless night is a syllabus in shadow work. Each panic spike an urgent invitation to descend into the basement of the psyche and retrieve the parts you betrayed. Imagine that basement as a vast archive lit by a single bulb swinging from the ceiling. Along the walls stand filing cabinets labeled rage, grief, desire, envy, wonder. Some drawers hang open, overflowing with memories you could not digest in real time. Moments when you were told to calm down, grow up, stop dreaming, toughen up. Dust thickens on these files because your conscious mind rarely visits. Yet every so often the bulb flickers, a drawer slides out on its own, and an emotion you thought was dead appears during a seemingly trivial conversation. You blush with disproportionate anger, or you tear up at an advertisement, and you scold yourself for being dramatic. The archive answers back, "I never died. I waited." But here's the part no one wants to hear. This isn't about loving yourself in some Instagram way. It's about sitting with the raw, messy parts you hate. Self-love sanitized into pastel quotes and manicured selfies is another theater for avoidance. Real self-love arrives mud-soaked and tear-streaked, wearing ripped clothes from wrestling internal demons. It sits on the shower floor at 3 in the morning when shame erupts without warning. It breathes through clenched teeth during conversations where your voice trembles but still refuses to lie. It is fierce because it has to be, protective because no one else can protect the abandoned child inside like an integrated adult can. Carl Jung argued that every personality contains a shadow, an unconscious side that the ego rejects. He did not frame the shadow as evil, but as morally neutral potential, an energy field teeming with life. Repress that energy, and it turns against you, projecting itself onto others so you can judge in them what you cannot tolerate in yourself. Integrate that energy, and it fuels creativity, empathy, and strength. Your shadow holds the ferocity that can enforce boundaries, the vulnerability that invites intimacy, the intuitive wisdom that senses danger before rational thought catches up. Deny these gifts, and you navigate the world half alive. Childhood conditioning taught you that emotions fall into binary categories, good or bad, acceptable or shameful. Parental expectations sharpened the binaries into rules. Maybe your father rewarded stoicism and scoffed at tears, or your mother praised politeness and punished anger. You learned to trade authenticity for attachment, because attachment kept food on the table and love in the room. Over time, the trade became involuntary. You could no longer sense where you ended and the performance began. Shame sealed the deal, whispering that any deviation from the approved script would lead to exile. The clever child who once relied on masking became an adult who cannot remove the mask without feeling naked skin sting in fresh air. The unconscious records each moment of self-betrayal like seismographs record tremors. The data accumulates, shake after shake, the foundation of identity fractures. A crack appears as chronic fatigue, another as unexplained irritability, another as addictions disguised as coping mechanisms. You might drink to quiet racing thoughts or shop to fill a void. Each behavior is a translator shouting, "Look under the floorboards." Yet society praises productivity and consumption, so the translator gets ignored while the cycle intensifies. Pause and feel your heartbeat. That rhythm is older than your earliest memory. It pulsates in darkness long before your eyes ever opened. The shadow is bonded to that rhythm, loyal even in exile. When you leave yourself, your shadow keeps the pulse. When you freeze in shame, your shadow holds the breath you forgot to take. When you numb out, your shadow collects the tears you refuse to shed. Reunion is not about conquering the shadow. Conquest was the original injury. Reunion is about kneeling beside the part of you that knelt in fear for too long and saying, "Rise, I will not leave." This vow threatens the structures your ego built. The inner critic panics because its job security depends on your fear. It flings old scripts. If you show anger, they will reject you. If you reveal neediness, they will mock you. If you admit confusion, they will exploit you. The critic learned these lines from real experiences where vulnerability met punishment. It believes it protects you by repeating them. Integration responds, "I cannot heal while gagged." Silence is not safety. Suppression is not peace. The critic trembles, expecting retaliation, but receives compassion instead. Compassion does not negate accountability. It invites it. You do not excuse harmful behavior when you integrate rage. You harness rage as a signal that a boundary was crossed, then decide how to act with integrity. And there's something even harder. This companion isn't just your light, it's your darkness too. And you need both. Light without darkness becomes blinding. Darkness without light becomes suffocating. Together they create depth, contrast, and perspective. Think of life as a painting. Highlights mean nothing without shadows defining form. Societies that worship permanent positivity flatten human experience into a bland canvas, ignoring the chiaroscuro that gives art its soul. Refusing your own darkness robs you of the capacity to understand another's. Empathy grows where you have first sat with your own fear, your own rage, your own sorrow. You might wonder how to begin courting the shadow without being devoured by it. Start with consent. Create a private space where you can meet suppressed emotions without distractions. Silence the phone, dim the lights, feel the ground under your feet. Invite an emotion to speak. Perhaps sadness arrives first, draped in memories of nights you cried quietly under blankets so no one would hear. Instead of analyzing, listen. Let images surface, an empty playground swing at dusk, a report card with red ink, a silent dinner table thick with unspoken tension. Breathe through each image until your body signals release. A sigh, a yawn, a tear sliding down a cheek. Those signals mean energy once frozen has moved. Next day, anger may knock. It enters like storm clouds rolling over an open field. Your pulse quickens, palms warm, maybe shoulders tighten as if bracing for impact. Remind yourself anger is protective, not destructive, when honored. Ask where the boundary was violated. A memory may flash of a boss who took credit for your work, or a partner who dismissed your feelings, feel the heat, clench fists if needed, growl into a pillow. Let the fire burn clean without turning it inward as shame or outward as aggression. The body's tremor might return. Ride it until calm follows. Anger spent through presence becomes clarity, guiding assertive action rather than impulsive harm. Some days the shadow shows gifts you forgot, a vision from childhood of painting oceans with reckless color, abandoned when an adult mocked the mess. Joy may rush in, shocking you with its brightness. You laugh and tears mix with laughter. The laugh says, "I never left. You left me." Creativity, spontaneity, sensuality, all exiled with so-called negative emotions, come home when the gate is open. Integration is not a funeral for pain. It is a banquet where each part has a seat and a voice. Remember the paradox. The companion you avoid unlocks freedom, not by erasing hardship, but by dissolving illusion. Life still delivers loss, conflict, uncertainty. Integrated individuals still grieve, still falter. The difference lies in how they meet adversity. They no longer abandon themselves when storms hit. They hold the inner child during panic. They let the warrior speak when injustice arises. They let the sage rest when overwork tempts. They respect the body's seasons rather than forcing perpetual summer. Shadow work heals relationships by ending projection. When you own jealousy, you stop accusing partners of crimes they never considered. When you embrace vulnerability, you no longer shame others for tears. When you integrate aggression, you channel it into protecting the marginalized instead of attacking the weak. Owning darkness illuminates compassion because you recognize the battlefield inside everyone. Judgment softens into discernment. Condemnation transforms into curiosity. Society pulls in the opposite direction, peddling doctrines that promise certainty. Political ideologies ask for absolute allegiance. Religious movements insist on sinlessness. Corporate cultures reward conformity. The shadow disrupts certainty by presenting contradictions. You can be loving and still harbor rage, brilliant and still make mistakes, devoted and still crave autonomy. Holding contradictions feels threatening to institutions that depend on predictable behavior. Embracing contradiction nurtures psychological flexibility, the very trait that sustains mental health during rapid change. Pain remains a faithful tutor. Next time loneliness presses like cold glass against your spine, let it speak. It may say you skipped listening to the body for weeks. Fatigue may reveal a pattern of overgiving that nostalgia painted as kindness. Anxiety may expose an unspoken truth you swallowed rather than risk conflict. Each symptom invites dialogue. Ask not why it visits, let it declare its purpose. The answer will rarely flatter the ego, but it will liberate the heart. Remember, you need both light and darkness. Without sorrow, you would never grasp the depth of joy. Without fear, courage would hold no meaning. Without limitations, creativity would lack brilliance born from constraint. The shadow is the compost that nourishes flowering. Flowers grown in sterile sand wilt quickly. Those grown in rich soil fed by decay stand vibrant. Your psychic soil craves nutrients found only in the decayed experiences relegated to memory's basement. Integration unfolds in spirals, not straight lines. You will touch a wound, breathe through it, feel relief, then months later revisit the same territory from a deeper vantage. This repetition is not failure. It is a spiral staircase winding into greater self-knowledge. Each pass reveals subtler layers, the rage under the sadness, the grief under the rage, the longing under the grief. Eventually you arrive at the core, an unbroken essence that never needed fixing, only witnessing. Society may label this journey self-indulgent. Ignore that chorus. Self-abandonment, not self-inquiry, breeds selfishness. People disconnected from inner life project pain outward, fueling cycles of exploitation. People anchored in self-awareness extend genuine empathy because they honor the same complexity in others that they have befriended in themselves. Take one more breath. Feel the temperature in the room, the weight of the body on its seat, the pulse in the fingertips. This moment is real, unscripted, imperfect. The forgotten companion stands beside you, jacket dusty, eyes hopeful. They are no longer content to be a metaphor, they want embodiment. Embodiment begins when you exit the tunnel of easy illusions and walk the path that promises nothing but authenticity. The trek will ask for courage, patience, and endless compassion. It will break you open, which is another way of saying it will introduce you to the magnitude of your capacity to live. On the days you tremble, remember the vow: you will not leave yourself again. On the nights shame returns, remember the spiral. Revisiting does not annul progress. On the mornings joy bursts, remember the soil. Without darkness, the bloom could not exist. You stand at the tunnel mouth once more. Behind you lies the landscape of performances and partial living. Ahead lies the wilderness of wholeness. Step forward. The shadow matches your stride, neither ahead nor behind, but at your side where the most important companion was always meant to walk. Take a slow, deliberate breath and notice how the chest opens on its own schedule. No command required. That movement is proof that life carries you even when willpower falters. From this point forward, every practice I offer begins with that silent evidence. The body already knows how to survive. Your task is to relearn how to cooperate with it instead of controlling it. The 3 tools ahead, shadow dialogue, somatic awareness, and the radical honesty ritual, are not hacks or feel-good tricks. They are invitations to build a long-term alliance with the parts of you that once felt safer in exile. Adopt them as daily companions, the way you might carry water on a desert walk. No miracles promised, only sustainable hydration for a soul that has spent years running dry. Shadow dialogue. Begin with paper, pen, and a closed door. Write a greeting to a part of yourself you usually silence. Address anger, envy, shame, or longing by name. Example: hello, anger. I know I pretend you do not exist. Then place the pen in your non-dominant hand. Allow the exiled voice to answer without censorship. The handwriting may tremble. Let it. Grammar may fracture. Let it. Content may shock the ego. Stay present. 10 minutes of pure transcription often reveals more truth than 10 hours of intellectual analysis. When the dialogue feels complete, switch hands again and thank the voice for speaking. Fold the page, date it, and store it somewhere private. Over weeks, these pages create a living archive that charts reconciliation in real time. This is not about fixing yourself. It is about sitting at the same table with the parts you abandoned and saying, I'm not leaving anymore. Somatic awareness. Choose a quiet corner, stand or sit, and drop attention one vertebra at a time until it settles in the belly. Name aloud the first physical sensation you notice: tightness, flutter, heat, numbness. Let the description stay simple and factual. Then trace that sensation with the mind, the way a fingertip might trace the rim of a glass. Resist the urge to stretch it away or breathe it smooth. Permission alone often causes muscles to release their defensive contraction. If a memory or emotion surfaces, nod internally as if saying, I see you. Remain with the sensation for 5 slow breaths. When the timer reaches 5 minutes, bow your head slightly to mark closure. Regular practice teaches the nervous system that feeling does not equal drowning. Shame lives in hidden corners of tissue. Steady witnessing turns those corners into open rooms where air circulates freely. Radical honesty ritual. Once every 24 hours, speak a sentence you once considered unspeakable. The sentence must be factual, present tense, and self-referential. Examples: I feel terrified about aging and money. Or, I miss my ex more than I admit. Whisper it in a parked car, speak it into a voice memo, or share it with a trusted companion committed to non-interference. End the sentence with a full stop, then breathe out completely before any justification tries to rush in. This ritual dismantles the inner courtroom where you serve as both prosecutor and defendant. One sentence a day keeps the psyche honest without overwhelming the system. Over months, these confessions create an internal climate where truth feels normal and repression feels foreign. Weaving the practice's morning pages of shadow dialogue, prime emotional honesty. Midday somatic awareness keeps the body from re-enlisting old armor. Nightly radical honesty empties residue before sleep, freeing dreams to process instead of suppress. Combined, the trio functions like sunlight, water, and soil for an inner ecosystem that has waited years to photosynthesize. Progress will not travel a straight line. Some days the pen refuses to move, the body feels stone silent, and the honest sentence arrives as a whisper. Celebrate persistence over performance. The goal is presence, not perfection. Call to community healing in isolation carries unnecessary weight. Every reclaimed fragment of self longs to stand among others who refuse to sanitize their humanity. After you finish today's practice, share a reflection in the comments section beneath this video. Describe a moment when one of these tools cracked open a door you thought was welded shut. If writing publicly feels too raw, type a single phrase that signals commitment. I am staying with myself. Your words create a breadcrumb trail for others who still wander in the dark hallways of self-abandonment. Remember, this space rejects quick fixes and welcomes honest labor. Each comment becomes a lighthouse for someone searching the coastline at 3 in the morning, convinced no shore exists. Together we prove that the shore is real, the water is survivable, and the most important companion never left our side. You sit with the room quiet and the screen glowing, every lesson of the past half hour settling into muscle and marrow. Something inside feels strangely still, as if the search engines and social feeds have lost their magnetic pull. That stillness carries both weight and relief. Weight, because it reveals how long the body has been bracing for impact. Relief, because bracing is no longer needed when truth finally walks through the door. The journey we trace together began with a silent ache beneath polite smiles, traveled through broken idols of positivity and productivity, and paused to gather practical tools that refuse to sugarcoat the labor of integration. Now, the path bends toward the deepest realization of all. The most important companion is not your partner, your parent, your mentor, or your best friend. The companion who decides whether you feel at home in the world is the self you left behind, the one carrying every wound, every untold story, every impulse that once felt unsafe. They never stopped calling your name. You simply kept the volume down to survive. Picture that companion standing under a lone street lamp at midnight, suitcase in hand, waiting for a return ticket that never came. They watched you chase careers, romances, accolades, spiritual highs, yet they remained in the same spot because you never issued the invitation to move back in. Tonight the latch clicks, the door swings open, and there is room at your kitchen table for the one soul you abandoned in the pursuit of being acceptable. That invitation changes nothing about the world outside. It changes everything about the world inside. Integration sounds grand, but its daily expression is humble. You wake and notice a knot in the stomach instead of rushing to caffeine. You sit at traffic lights and feel rage fizz in the chest, choosing to breathe rather than dismiss it as irrational. You hear an inner critic deliver a familiar verdict, and you answer, not with compliance, but with curiosity. These micro moments accumulate, like droplets gathering into a river that eventually carves canyons. When the river of self-contact flows freely, loneliness loses its throne. The internal landscape gains texture and color because every emotion, every memory, every shadow now has a rightful place. The self you left behind is more than a collage of hurts. They also protect gifts you scarcely remember, unfiltered laughter that once erupted without apology, dreams that once felt reachable before practicality tightened its grip, sensuality that once shimmered across skin before shame named it dangerous, courage that once spoke up in classrooms before humiliation pushed it underground. Integration clears the dust off these artifacts. They do not return in an instant. They emerge like seedlings breaking through soil after a long winter, fragile yet determined. Expect resistance. The old operating system framed disconnection as normal. Voices will whisper that nothing truly changes, that authenticity invites ridicule, that vulnerability is a luxury. Smile gently at those voices. They are echoes, not oracles. Every step you now take with your reclaimed companion rewrites the code that manufactured those warnings. Progress may feel like 2 steps forward, 1 step sideways, and 1 step spiraling in circles. Measure growth not by linear distance, but by depth of presence. Depth shows itself when a trigger appears, and instead of immediate flight, you stay for 1 slow breath and then another. Community amplifies this work. Shame shrivels in the presence of honest company. When you share a raw confession and someone nods without flinching, neural pathways rewire to include safety inside connection. When you witness another person name a forbidden feeling, your own permission expands. Every voice that breaks silence becomes a lantern along the trail. That is why the comment section beneath this video is not decoration. It is a communal hearth. Each sentence you type becomes a spark that keeps the fire alive for someone scrolling at dawn, wondering whether their pain is too peculiar to be understood. Let your words prove otherwise. If you recognized yourself in these words, write in the comments, "I'm done running from my pain." Let's see how many of us are ready for the truth. Look around whatever room shelters you right now. Notice textures, shadows, pockets of light. This ordinary scene is sacred because you are finally here within it. The companion stands beside you, neither behind nor ahead. Together you will navigate deadlines, disappointments, celebrations, and quiet Sundays. You will still stumble, you will still grieve, but stumbles will not equal abandonment, and grief will not equal exile. You carry a home inside that travels everywhere you go. Take 1 more deliberate breath. Inhale the certainty that you belong to yourself. Exhale the belief that belonging depends on flawless performance. Feel your feet root into flooring, your pelvis drape over the chair, your spine lift like a tree trunk. The body you once critiqued becomes a temple where shadow and light worship side by side. Each heartbeat drums a vow. Never again will I leave myself stranded at that street lamp. This is only the beginning. There's still more no one dares to say.